So a quick introduction about us, the speakers. I'm Sachin Gupta. I'm the founder and CEO at HackerEarth. I'll be talking about some of the major trends that we've observed changing over the last few years and how that has impacted a CTO's ability to add to the overall innovation coefficient for their organization, and how does that translate to hackathons.
I'm Anand. I work as a product manager with HackerEarth. I take care of the innovation product here.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll quickly take you through the agenda of the things that we plan to cover on the webinar today. So we'll begin with a quick introduction to HackerEarth and then talk about the changing landscape. Then we'll be talking about why should you be investing in internal hackathons. Then we move over to a customer case study, and then we'll end with a quick demo of our product HackerEarth Sprint and talk about some of the best practices that one should be adopting in order to do their hackathons successfully. So yeah, as I said, a quick introduction about ourselves. We're a 6-year-old organization, started as a community of developers in 2012. Over the years, we've grown to an enterprise product company. And our mission is to help companies or businesses across the globe to identify the right people and give them the power to disrupt through constant innovation. And that's the background about, in that context, we're speaking about hackathons and how they can lead to innovation and crowdsourcing. Just a perspective on the kind of things that we've done, 2.3 million innovators on our community today, more than 1,000 different innovation campaigns or hackathons. So these have been run both on the external community as well as companies use our product to run their own internal hackathons. More than 500 customers. We'll be talking about some of the Fortune 1000 customers today on how they've leveraged hackathons for their own internal innovation. And of course, the customers are spread all across the globe. So yeah, I'd like to begin with a couple of quick facts about the macro trends that are taking place currently. So this is from a survey from Forbes, which is 2018 Global CEO Outlook, which says that 72% of the CEOs believe that the next 3 years will be more critical for their industry than the last 50 years. And companies today are 460% more likely to fail within 5 years than they were in the earlier decades. And the way I would put both of these statistics, which could be quite alarming for any executive, is this is all in the backdrop of digital transformation or digital disruption. Every business, Mark Anderson has this quote which says software is eating the world. I don't think there can be anything more true than that, because every business that we know out there today is being disrupted by technology in one form or the other. In a lot of businesses, technology used to be one of the core pillars of running a business. It used to be more of a supporter that would make your processes more efficient, which would help you manage things internally. But today, technology has become your core business. I'll just take a quick example and then we'll move on, and that is of banks. So banks or the banking industry today is no more about the brick and mortar business, which it has been for centuries. Your entire bank today is now locked in a small mobile app, and the same mobile app is competing with other social consumer applications like Facebook, Twitter, your enterprise business productivity applications like Gmail and so on for a person's mind share. So if you look at it, a bank is competing with all of these behemoths, and I think every bank would agree on this. So this is just an example from the banking industry. Same parallels can be found in other industries as well. So given this background of digital transformation, the role of a CTO has changed significantly. I don't think their role is anymore to just provide the technology infrastructure to ensure the tech aspects of the business are running fine. I think they have now become a core part of the organization's innovation strategy. They're part of the organization's strategic initiatives, and their role is to ensure that the organization is innovating at a fast pace, that its employee or its workforce is being leveraged to the best of their potential, and they can actually stay, and their job is to ensure that the organization stays ahead of the curve by leveraging technology the right way. So I mentioned about some of the macro trends And I'm going to cover three major trends in the following three slides, which kind of emphasize or talk about the challenges that a CTO today faces. The first is faster is better than perfect. With the whole advent of cloud, the API ecosystem, open source, and various other tools and frameworks that are easily at our disposal, what these things have done, the whole cloud economy, API ecosystem, what it has done is it has allowed prototyping to become very rapid. For one to identify a problem, and I'm talking largely in the context of software right now. So it has become fairly easy for someone to identify a problem and come up with a working proof of concept in a duration as short as 24 hours to 48 hours. And if you contrast this with what used to be the case even half a decade back, something like this was not fathomable. One could not think of turning around solutions in that. And of course, I'm not talking about solutions that are production ready, but at least prototypes that can be demonstrated, that can be tested out. Earlier, it would take anything between a month to a couple of months to come up with a basic prototype. Now, with that, what it means is that today's organizations, particularly the larger organizations, have to match the nimbleness and pace of a smaller organization, which means your workforce, your technology teams have to be ready to move fast, ship out faster, and rather than focusing on being perfect, it's about getting into the market first. The second trend or challenge that you could say is that it has become harder for an executive today, a C-level executive, to clearly understand what are the skills of their employees, again, in the context of technology, but can be applicable to other domains as well. Like, what are the skills of their employees? What are some of the core competencies that people actually possess in the organization, but the organization is not really aware of that? What are the gaps where they need to focus, and so on? So everybody is talking about AI, ML, IoT, and all of those things. And the inherent assumption generally lies is that the existing organization does not have, or the existing workforce does not have any capabilities around that. But you would be quite surprised to know that if there was a way to accurately survey the skill sets of your own employees, you'll be pleasantly surprised to know that there are a lot of people within the organization who've been developing these skill sets on the side. They take up some side projects, they contribute to open source, they learn over the weekend, and they are kind of building out these skill sets. So it's becoming harder and harder for any executive to have a strong grasp on the tech skills of its employees. And that's largely because of the advent of the MOOCs, democratization of online education, and because of the fact that it's just become so simple to go onto the web, pick up a technology, and roll out a prototype or start developing skills. So that's the second challenge that CTO face. And the third is the whole concept of design thinking and being closer to the customer. So, and this is a no-brainer. Organizations need to de-risk their product strategy by enabling a lot of cross-team collaboration. So gone are the eras where a single product owner with a bunch of analysts or a consultant firm would come up with a product strategy and chart out the roadmap for the next 3-4 years. Today, it's a lot about cross-team collaboration. Folks from customer support, CSM, sales, marketing, of course, product and technology coming together and ideating and trying to understand the customer needs, and then coming up with solutions which are highly customer aware. So organizations need to find out a way by which they can bring these diverse groups of people within their organization together to solve some of the challenging customer problems that the organizations may be facing. So with that, these three mega trends or challenges that I spoke about, I kind of want to segue into the whole concept of hackathons, because a well conducted, a properly conducted hackathon actually helps you do all of those three things that I just spoke about. It helps you move faster. You could leverage hackathons to quickly turn around prototypes in a very short duration. It helps you to understand what's the pulse of your tech team, what are the skills that people care about, what are the skill gaps. It also promotes peer learning, and then of course it gives you the opportunity in a very I would say in a very fun and interactive manner to bring different stakeholders across different teams to come together and try and solve customer problems. So just an example of this is, one of our customers, Nutanix. What they do is that they host these mega hackathons 2 or 3 times a year, and they bring together. They fly down every time. They fly down 50 of their sales engineers to various locations, tech team locations that they have across the globe, and they pair up sales engineers with engineers. And sales engineers' job is to just essentially they're like pre-sales, and their job is to demo the product, talk to the customer, understand the requirements. And the whole concept behind that is that they want their engineers to have a very good context of what are the core customer problems, what are the problems that customers face. And not only that, just continuing on the example of Nutanix, every time Nutanix does this hackathon, they're able to take 3 to 4 prototypes that get built into that, and they move it to production, deploy it in production in as short as a quarter. So something that would earlier take anything between 6 months to 12 months to go into production goes into production in just a quarter because of the whole hackathon exercise. So with that, let's try and understand what really is a hackathon. What is it all about? So this is a definition of hackathon, which says that hackathon is a week-long burst of creative energy. It can be a mix of software development, design, product validation, and other things. And essentially, it's an activity that brings something useful or cool into the world. It can take a form of product service or even an artwork. So there are a lot of different flavors of how you can run a hackathon. So what I want to focus in this definition is on a couple of things. The first is that it's a weekend-long burst of creative energy. So if you look at the definition of hackathon, there is inherently a time aspect. It's a time-bound activity. A weekend is typically is the more common duration for a hackathon, but these days you can see hackathons running for as short as 6 hours to going up to 2 to 3 weeks. But the point is that it's a time-bound activity. Then it can be a mix of software development, design, product validation, and other things. And what I want to stress here is that it's not just limited to software development. Hackathons encompasses folks from different backgrounds, and nowadays organizations conduct hackathons which are purely non-technical in nature. So one of our prospects wants to run a hackathon on its sales force, its sales team, and just get creative ideas around what kind of problems that customers are facing and how it can be done better. So it's a lot, the second point, it's a lot more cross-functional. And the third is it's essentially about building something useful, and that something could be anything. It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be an artwork, it could be a concept paper, it could be an idea, it could be a business plan. It does not necessarily need to be a working software product. It could be anything that creates value. Okay, just a moment. Yeah. So with that definition of a hackathon, I want to show you how a hackathon looks like. This is, a picture of one of our hackathons that we did in the Silicon Valley /hack. And as you can clearly see, there is a spirit, there is an aura in this hackathon. You can see that people are collaborating, they're talking to each other, they're coming together and solving problems. There's just a casual air about this hackathon. It's very, very different from what you would see in a typical work environment, where people most of the times are generally siloed into their own things. But a hackathon is a lot about bringing different people together and creatively solving the problem. So in addition to the 3 things that I spoke about moving fast, understanding the pulse of the tech team, and the other thing, a hackathon also helps, has very, I would say, tactical or tangible benefits from a CTO perspective. The first is, a hackathon is a great way to create a culture of creative ideation. You can, by committing yourself to doing at least 1 hackathon every quarter, you're creating a culture that tells people that, hey, it's about creativity. We as an organization are about creatively solving problems. We are about expression of freedom. We are about doing interesting things. And it just changes the perspective within the organization. We ourselves at HackerEarth do a hackathon every quarter, and the entire organization rallies behind that. And it really gives, it sends out a very strong signal to the organization that, hey, we are a company that cares about innovation and creativity. And the best thing is it gives you a very structured way of doing that. So the second benefit of, from a CTO's perspective of hosting a hackathon is that it's a very nice way to jumpstart your product roadmap. So what happens, in a hackathon is that you end up, in a lot of hackathons, you end up building out a working prototype. That's like one of the minimum requirements of participating in a hackathon. And from an engineering roadmap perspective, you could actually, the time spent in the hackathon for 24 to 48 hours can actually result in jump starting some of the key engineering items that you want to take up in that, say, particular quarter. And if I was to contrast the time spent in a hackathon to build that particular piece of software or a particular project with with the time that they would take while doing it in the regular course of work, the contrast is pretty high. So what you could achieve in a hackathon in 24 to 48 hours can take up to 1 week or 2 weeks or even 3-4 weeks while you're doing your regular work. And the obvious reason is that when you're in a hackathon, you're just focusing on that particular problem, but it gives you a great way to just jumpstart your roadmap. And the third aspect is that a hackathon can help you actually continuously create or generate a lot of interesting ideas for your future roadmaps. So in a typical hackathon, you would have, let's say there are 20 or say 15 teams participating. Each of those 15 teams would end up submitting a particular project. The project could be, like I said in the past, it could be a software project, it could be a business case. So keeping that generic definition in mind, they'll come up with 15 projects, but in order to come up with those 15 projects, they will actually come up with 2 or 3 times of ideas. So collectively, the team would come up with 30 to 45 different ideas. Some of them may not be implementable in that particular duration, so they may pick up some other component to work on. But then those remaining 30 or 15 ideas that you have generated can also be used for your future roadmap. So that's, till now I've talked about why hackathons, what kind of problems they help for you to solve, why it's particularly benefit from a CTO's perspective. Now I want to talk about why hackathons actually work. Why are they able to do all of those things that I just spoken about in the last few slides? 4 very simple reasons from our perspective that make these hackathons work. The first is the hackathons are inherently goal oriented. You give a timeline, you give a deadline to the participants, you give them an interesting problem to solve, and you say, just go with it. And humans are inherently goal driven. When we get a deadline, our creativity comes out in a better form. We are able to actually see things through a lot better when we are running towards a certain goal. What also helps is that these goals are not very long term. So these goals are not stretched over a month or 2 months. So in this hackathon, in a 24-hour hackathon, there's an instant gratification for a participant as they're chasing that goal. The second reason why we believe hackathons work is that hackathons are an excellent way to just democratize the concept, the democratization of creativity and innovation within the organization. When you're participating in a hackathon, your rank and file doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how senior you are within the organization, or you're just a new kid who's just joined on their internship last week. Everybody is same, and everybody is measured on the same scale. You come in, you give your idea, you build your prototype, and you show how it works. You let your work do the talking, and everybody is evaluated or benchmarked on that, I would say, unbiased metric. Everybody's looked at the same set of evaluation criteria. And typically, if an organization is serious about investing in the hackathons, most of the time they also include their senior leadership in the form of say mentors or evaluators or judges. So for an employee, by participating in a hackathon, they really have a chance of putting forth their idea to some of the most senior people within the organization. This is, if you look at something like this, it's extremely unlikely that something like this can happen in your regular flow of work, because they're like, despite organizations trying to be flat all the time, still there are a lot of hierarchies and processes that creep in, just because as organizations grow, it becomes more complex to do all of those things in a very linear manner. But hackathons just democratize this whole thing. The third thing is, hackathons are a very focused activity. There are no distractions. When you're working in your day-to-day work, there are tons and tons of distractions for everyone. But when you're in a hackathon, there's just one problem to solve. And the way the environment is set up is that everybody is trying to solve that one particular problem that they're working on. And there are absolutely no distractions. And the fourth is, hackathons allow people to express their creativity. Every time every person that I've met over the last many years, each one of them have an idea. They have an interesting idea about how things can be done better. And generally they find it difficult for these ideas to be expressed in their regular flow of work. But what hackathons do is that they allow people to express their creativity. It allows them to work on some of those things that they've always wanted to. And when you give an avenue like that to your employees, again, it's a great employee motivational activity in some sense, because you're telling them, hey, we do care about what you think. And if you feel that this particular idea could change the world, go out and do it and prove it. So with that, I want to move on to a case study of one of our customers. I want to talk about how they successfully leveraged hackathons over a course of 2 years and saw some really amazing results within their organization. So before I talk about what were they able to achieve with those hackathons, I want to just give you a picture of how they had structured their program. So over a period of 2 years, the organization conducted 19 different hackathons. The way they had structured it was that the hackathons were distributed across 4 different business units, and there was one new hackathon, at least one new hackathon going live every quarter. So after they had set it up for about 3 to 6 months, the organization was in such a stage that at any given point of time, there was at least one hackathon running for a particular business unit, which means that for people working within the organization, there was always one initiative, at least one initiative running, where they could come in and solve interesting problems, where they could give their ideas, and where they could create something new. And from an operational perspective, the whole program was being run by a central team of HR, more around HR, organizational development, and they had a core team which was running the operations, but they also had owners within each business unit who were running their own specific hackathons. So that's how they had structured it. Now let's talk about what were they able to achieve. So over a period of 2 years, they engaged about 1,200 odd employees, which formed about 470 odd teams in different hackathons. And that resulted in about 226 submissions. So these are actual projects that were built as part of those hackathons. And what's most interesting is that 10% of these projects were taken to production, they were taken to market over that period, over that duration. So out of these 226, 26 were integrated with the product, and 8 projects were actually hacks that resulted in process improvements. So again, ties back to the point that the output of a hackathon need not be a software application. It could be a hack that improves your process, which improves your process, right? And all of this that the organization did, all of these 226 submissions, out of which 26 were taken to production, 8 resulted in process improvements. All of this was done while their regular business was running. So if you contrast this with what they were doing a year earlier, there was so much more that they were able to do while still doing what they were doing for the last so many years. So a hackathon, in some sense, you could kind of equate it to the Google 80-20 rule, which has actually been, not really. A lot of Googlers inside say that it's not really 80-20; it's actually 100 plus 20 with like 120% rule, because a lot of times people end up working on those side projects because they really want to work on those side projects, but they also understand that they have other things to look at. So that's what, and this is a testament to that. The organization continued to deliver what it was delivering, and in fact better, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But they were also able to add a lot more things into the delivery pipeline. Now, this is just a tangible benefit in terms of what they were able to achieve from the hackathon. But these hackathons also had some other benefits or other effects, positive effects on the overall organization. The organization saw an increased rate of meeting their product launch deadlines. And that this ties back to one of my earlier points that I made about the whole culture of innovation, the culture of moving fast. So their ability to meet deadlines increased by 21%. It went from 80% to an impressive 98%. And secondly, the time spent on peer learning also grew significantly. It just doubled. So the organization was spending 18% of the time in peer learning in 2016. That doubled to 35%. And there was an overall training coverage of about 88% of the technical workforce. So they were able to cover almost like 90% of the technical workforce in the training activity. And what's most interesting is that employee engagement within the organization went up by 18%. So these are all tangible benefits that the organization saw because of the periodic exercise of leveraging hackathons for building some really cool things in the product roadmap. And obviously it had a collateral benefit of increasing employee engagement, increasing peer learning, and so on. So with that, I kind of I'll hand over this webinar to Anand, and he's going to first talk about how one can host a hackathon successfully, like what are the key ingredients, and then jump over to a quick product demo. Over to you, Anand.
Hey, thanks, Sachin. So before we get on to the product, I'd like to share some thoughts and learnings that we've had and that we've seen by hosting a lot of hackathons. Mind you, we have managed and launched more than 1,000 hackathon and innovation campaigns for our customers, and these learnings are a result of those. First and most important thing is the need to ask the right question, what the hackathon is about and why are we even having these hackathon. Whenever we're working with an audience, if we ask them to solve a particular problem, not many would be interested. However, if you are able to set a context that this problem statement is very important for our business, it will help solve certain customer pain points, that actually drives the people to solve it in a much more structured fashion, right? People like to solve real world problems that businesses and customers actually face. So it's very important to ask the right question. Customer and user centricity. Now, in our experience, we have seen large and small companies, employees are not used to seeing the customer use the product. They do not know how they're using the product. Yes, we are in a world right now where we are tracking everything. However, seeing it firsthand gives you a very, very different experience and a different context. And the most important point is the context. You need to see how a customer is using your product in his particular context. So it's very important that we have a lot of people talking about, in an ideal case, you can bring in a few customers, talk about how they use the product, in which context the people use the product, and share how a user is using and how he's going about the product. It'll help them build a lot of context and help you build a lot of better hacks. Promoting creativity. Now, promoting creativity seems like a very trivial task. However, it's probably the most important activity in any hackathon. Now, we need to ensure the crowd is diverse. Now, when you're talking of diverse crowd, it's not just the gender diversity that we're talking about. Obviously, that helps and that's very, very important. But we're also talking from a diversity from an experience point of view. We're talking of people from different cities, different backgrounds, different kind of experiences, different functions, different business units in an ideal case. That not only ensures people are talking, it kind of ensures people are working with people whom they don't regularly work with. There's a lot of potential to learn from these other teammates as well. Another critical point of creativity to ensure you promote this event. Now, there's an assumption that because it's a very interesting problem statement, people will turn up. No, we have seen that marketing and promotion of the events have to be taken up seriously. Now, in an ideal case, we can rope in a couple of marketing folks to help you with some material and share these details with the audience. Another point is we need to ensure the outcomes that you're expecting are very clear. That is, if you're expecting prototypes, make it clear to the audience that you are expecting prototypes. While it's not a necessity, and like we have mentioned earlier, hackathons are not primarily for the tech folks. They're for everyone. You can also keep it open that we are expecting ideas, and hopefully there'll be some team who will pick up the ideas and take them to a prototype level, right? And one very, very important thing at the end of a hackathon, when you're actually demoing the product, set a time limit. Now, overall hackathons are these time limited events. However, when they're demoing the product, if you're giving them an extremely long time to demo the product, they're getting to some of the nitty gritty which are really not important for business. Set a fairly strong limit, something like 5 minutes, wherein they just focus on the core customer problem and how the product addresses it. Moving on to the next problem, it's limit the limits. Now, because we were investing time and money in conducting the hackathon, we've seen a lot of people want to ensure there are no distractions for the people who are taking part. So we end up putting up limits. But what we do not realize, we end up putting so many limits, it becomes extremely restrictive for the participants to be at their best. Some of the classic examples being team size. Minimum of 3 people required in a team. Now, rather than focusing on a solution, a person who has a very good idea is focusing on whom we should partner with. That is not the intent of a hackathon. So something like a team size, you can keep it open, like minimum of 1 person, but maximum of say 5 or 6 people. Technology used. Now, like I said, the focus is to solve the problem and not the technology. Technology usage, those can be figured out at a later point in time. Hackathon submissions are another classic example. Uh, Ideas can be in any form and shape. It can be in the form of text, it can be in the form of a file, it can be form of a script, it can be in the form of a video or a presentation as well. Do not limit the format of a particular submission. And another classic error that we've seen from a lot of from a lot of our customers is that they make the problem statement either very specific, which only attracts, say, which can only be answered by a few people in the engineering team, say the people who know machine learning and no one else. That's not right. Or the other side of the spectrum where we've seen the problem statement are too abstract. Work with your teams to and your middle management to find out what the right problem statement is, so that you give just the right amount of information and context to the audience to work with. Next, we next is being deeply cross-functional. We cannot stress enough how it's important to have these deeply cross-functional teams. It's very important to include all stakeholders. Now, what this basically helps you is solve problem. Now, this solving problem can be done in two basic ways. Solve the actual problem at hand of the customer, or help your support teams in certain manners which will enable them to solve customer problems. Both can be done. But however, for this, the people who are working on the ground need some context, both the customer's perspective, also how we are supporting our customers. Both these perspectives are very important for the team. Final and probably very, very important point is when you're concluding a hackathon, we would have, say, the winners, and there's a very high possibility that you just focus on winners. However, we've seen many times that winners are good, but the longer tail, that is the third, fourth, fifth, and possibly up to 10th, or even ideas which have scored overall poorly, however, have done exceedingly well in a couple of the parameters which are very important to your business. You need to focus on those ideas as well. So it's not just the winners, so it's a bunch of ideas that you're focusing on, and encourage the teams to work further in the time which they have outside their work hours to build further on their prototype. This ensures that there are IPs that are being created for your business on a constant basis. Now, on that note, let me take you to the product and show you how easy it is for you to create a hackathon campaign on HackerEarth Sprint.
So Anand, while you walk them through the product, just one point that I wanted to make around following through, wanted to give an example of again, in Nutanix, what they did, what they've done consistently with their hackathons is that every time they do it, there are 4 or 5 things, 4 or 5 submissions that get integrated into the actual product, and they launch it just in a short duration of in 2 months. Of course, the winners would have been like one, two, or three, but they take 5 or 6 really good submissions and ensure that they go into production, and not into production over a period of 6 months, but in just 2 months. So that's I think is one of the examples I wanted to give about following through and why it's so important.
Right. Thanks, Sachin, for that. Now, as you can see, you're looking at a demo instance of a company called HeDemo. You're looking at the admin view of the things. So you can quickly go to create campaign. The product allows you to create idea campaign, hackathon campaign, and also different kind of custom campaigns based on your context. And we'll touch upon this at a later point in time. So for today's use case, let's quickly create a hackathon, right? So it's asking for a name. So let's call it demo. October. Right, now let's give it a name and a small description, basically what we are trying to solve. And that's it. Your campaign is ready. However, what you need to do is add the next level of detail. I think we've stressed that the problem statement is going to be extremely crucial, right? So you need to really think what the problem statement is. So if you notice, the platform already creates 4 phases. The first one is the ideation phase. The second one is a shortlisting phase. So once you've collected all the ideas, you can shortlist the top ideas and then move them on to the submission phase. Here, an admin can ask more details about the ideas. You can ask them more details in terms of what constraints they have, what details they need, what more help do they need to make their idea become a hack or a prototype. And obviously the final judging phase. The product also allows you to add a lot more judging phase. So you can get, in case you have a lot of ideas, you can bring the ideas down to say a 10 in this particular judging phase, and then add another phase of evaluation wherein you just allow the senior stakeholders to evaluate the top 10 ideas, right? Now let's quickly see how you can publish a campaign. Now here you have the problem statement, right? Like I said, you can add, the platform allows you to add as many problem statements as you can, but an ideal, in our experience, the ideal number is 4. So let's quickly add a couple of problem statements. I'll keep the problem statements generic for your understanding, but like I said, you need to work with your team and your stakeholders to see what is the right amount of details that need to go into a problem statement. So classic problem statements are increasing revenue, increase revenue. You can also tag these problem statements to certain themes. This basically helps you draw a lot more insights on the product, right? So here you see one problem statement has been added. Let's add another problem statement. Costs. Now, like I said, it can be a general theme, or you can tag it to any of the other themes as well. And the platform allows you to add a lot more themes based on your context. So if you're a pharma company or a supply chain company, you can add themes of your business, and that gets reflected here. So let's add the second problem statement, right? So we have 2 problem statements now. Let's move on. Now, privacy. Now, there are companies we have seen who are extremely open about the hackathon concept, from the point that they allow people to see all the ideas, people can collaborate on these ideas and build together. However, we have also seen companies where they said, I only want the teams to have visibility of the idea. I do not want it to be visible to others. So if I have a team, so the entire collaboration happens offline, and they can keep their ideas private. But in our demo case, let's keep it public, which basically helps collaboration. Let's move on to the next field, that's submission information. The product smartly defaults couple of fields, that is in this case submission title and description, as the minimum fields that are required in this particular phase. However, you can add a lot more custom fields, or you can choose from a default set of templates, right? Say you want a presentation upfront in the very first phase. So you can just click and quickly add to the fields. Now you have the control of making it mandatory or not. Now, like I said, hackathons are timed events, right? So you have the control of defining a particular start time and a particular end time. Now, we also enable you to conduct both online and offline events. However, if you have a distributed team, it's better to go for an online hackathon. However, assume that you are conducting a hackathon within a particular location. Say you're doing it in the Bay Area, you're doing it in a particular office. You can say that we are conducting an offline hackathon, and you can say put a particular location here, right? So for our demo, we'll just put that as an online hackathon and just save it, right? So your hackathon is set up, and you can publish it immediately. Now, if you see from a participant point of view, you can see that the hackathon is set up and it's open for you, right? So you can start adding ideas immediately. You can look at other submissions that are been added by other people, and what are the submissions that are added by me, right? However, you notice there's no image. So basically, image gives you overall personality to the campaign. So you have all the controls about how you manage a team, how you manage this entire campaign, this entire landing page, what kind of additional customization you need in case you want to add certain terms and conditions. You want to share certain resources with the people. Say you want to ask them to use certain APIs and build on top of those APIs. That is something that can be done on the product as well. In case you want to share certain blogs or certain videos, again, that also is possible on the platform. The platform also allows you to announce the prizes. Prizes are a very important trigger for people to participate. A very, very healthy prize ensures there is participation from every nook and corner of the organization, right? So this is more or less at a high level about the product. And what I'd like to share is I'd like to just quickly go back to just share a summary, right? So as we saw, it is extremely easy to use the Sprint platform. In 4 simple steps, you're able to set up the entire platform and an entire hackathon. So to just summarize the platform, it allows you to ask the right question. It's extremely user-centric. You can involve not just people within a particular team, but also involve customers in it. You can, the product allows you to collaborate with people from different teams. You can search people, you can search skills and collaborate. The product allows you to control all the limits. In case you're making certain limits extremely tight, the product tells you that your limits are extremely constraining to the audience. The product allows you to involve as many folks as possible from different teams, right? So let's quickly go on to a case study that have used the platform successfully. UST Global has been our customer for the last couple of years. Now they conducted many hackathons across their location. Some of their flagship events, which they conduct on an annual basis. So last year there was 3 of such flagship events. 1,300 odd participants had taken part in those events, and which were from 25 different countries. Of these hackathons, there are around 140 submissions that were received from the participants, of which close to 40% of them are today as a part of their internal incubation. They have multiple innovation programs that they run within the organization, and up to 40% of the ideas are actually are either being mentored upon in their innovation program, are already live in their current workflows. Now, the best part about UST Global is they didn't see hackathon as a event to just run campaigns to source ideas. They also use the platform to build on certain concept papers and white papers. They also use the capability of a product where we just didn't collect ideas, but also conducted certain programming challenges for their audience. So it's not just about ideas; it is also about different use cases that the platform allows you to perform. Uh, that's about it from our side in terms of how to conduct hackathons, how it's easy to how easy it is for us to conduct on a HackerEarth sprint, and how what are the best practices you should be following to run a particular hackathon.
Thanks, Anand. So I think with that, we can end the webinar. Thank you and have a great day.